Waxers, and welcome to Wax and Lyrical with Mains and Dutton. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague isn't here this week. He's not very well. We wish him all the best. He's usually sick, so this isn't an unnormal thing. We were supposed to be doing an AFC East preview this week. We're going to bounce that to next week. We're just going to do a quick interview Dutton did with JJ Zachariason, who's the editor-in-chief at Numberfire, author of the Late Round Quarterback and co-host of the Live Stream Fantasy Football. Then I'll come back and I'll do a little bit of a plug for DraftKings, and then we will leave you for this week, and then we'll have a double up next week when we'll do the AFC East and one of the NFC divisions as well. So first of all, enjoy the interview. Delighted to be joined now by JJ Zachariason. He's the editor at Numberfire. You also find him at the Late Round QB and the co-host of Living the Stream podcast. JJ, thanks very much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Just start, obviously this past week you celebrated your 100th episode of Living the Stream. Did you envision when you started it that you'd get this far, this long?
I mean, you would hope so whenever you set out to do something like that, but given that Denny Carter's my co-host, I had no idea what was going to happen. No, it's been a great ride. It's been a lot of fun. I say that as if it's over, but it's not. But yeah, I mean, I think that the big key with something like what we do at Living the Stream, we have fun with it, and it's definitely a different type of podcast, just given the content that we cover than what you find in other places. So I think that's really what's helped us continue and now have hit 100 episodes.
It does worry me, though, that the more I listen to it, the more, especially, certainly when it comes to food takes, the more like Denny that I actually sound like. Because I don't know whether it's that he's a fussy eater or I am, but there's some odd views there, shall we say.
Yeah, he makes you second guess a lot of things.
Obviously, another social media thing. You've started doing recently an awful lot of Periscope sessions. Was there any particular reason why you started doing that? Was it just you just thought it would be a way to reach out to the audience a bit better?
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. It gives you a different medium to really connect with people and let them know kind of how you feel about players and let them kind of dig into your mind. I mean, everyone has their job. Everyone has what they study every day, what they work on every day. It just so happens that what I'm looking at every day, all day long, is fantasy football and football-related things. So, I allow that to, just allow people to just talk to me, pick my brain, ask me whatever. And, I'm certainly not right all the time, but at least it's another way for folks to just have a good time and communicate about the sport that we love.
Because obviously one of the big problems with writing, especially, is that I find I like to think a bit of a smart ass myself, is sometimes it doesn't come across when you're joking, when you're writing, whereas obviously podcasting, and especially more with a visual idea, you can get that across more.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially with social media, with Twitter, you're limited to 140 characters, and this is a way, it's a social media platform in a way, so or it is, and so you're able to communicate ideas in a much different way, where you have to be a little bit more structured with an article, you have to be very concise in a tweet, and this is just a different way of kind of bridging that gap.
So obviously, some fantasy talk this week. Obviously, there was the news that Josh Gordon has been, what's the phrase? He's been reinstated conditionally, should we say? Yeah. You wrote an article for Numberfire about your thoughts on him. There seems to be some difference as to what to expect from him. Some people even speculating there'll even be a Brown. Where would you be comfortable taking him in drafts?
Yeah, I think at this point you have to kind of treat him as a wide receiver 3 with some upside, maybe a lower end wide receiver 3. You look at what he did last season, or I guess 2 seasons ago when he played about 5 games, and he only put up a top 24 usable performance in PPR leagues once. So he wasn't very usable a couple seasons ago. But then you look at what he did in his breakout year, the year before that, and he was essentially putting up statistics that we would see from a top 5 wide receiver, from the top wide receiver. I mean, he was not only giving you an incredible ceiling, but he was giving you better consistency that we've seen from a fantasy football wide receiver arguably ever. And so I think that you can't just ignore that season. At the same time, you can't put too much stock into what he did 2 seasons ago because the sample size is small. So if you look at things kind of in the middle there, that means you're going to probably get, with the 4-game suspension, you might get 5 or 6 usable weeks out of him, which is really a wide receiver 3 season. But again, you have to hold on to him a bit for those first 4 games. And that to me is really the biggest deal, is that when these guys get suspended, it's not as simple as, they're only playing 11 games or 12 fantasy relevant games. It's that you're holding on to them during the most high leverage time of the fantasy football season, where where waivers are key and things are going down that you didn't foresee happening. So I think that's really the key. So if you have a deeper bench, or if you're drafting him more as your wide receiver 4, that's when I would target Josh Gordon. Otherwise, I'm mostly staying away.
He was talking on Rotoviz Radio. Davis Mattock, I know obviously you're familiar with, he said he'd start thinking about taking him in the Alan Hearns, Deshaun Jackson range. Does that sound a bit rich, or is that about fair?
I think it's a little rich. I mean, there's guys like even Marvin Jones I would take over Josh Gordon, because I think Jones is in for a good season. I mean, there's some players, in that range that you can make a case for that are undervalued, obviously. But I think, in the way that drafts generally go, we'll say, I think he's more in that later 7th round, into the 8th round.
Another article you wrote, it was not. It was you commented on a post on Twitter. It was about the Baltimore Ravens offense. You said the only really Ravens player that you want anything to do with would be Kamar Aiken. Is there an offense with more question marks at every position than the Ravens across the entire NFL?
I don't think so. I mean, you look at it, maybe Tennessee, but I think Baltimore is just kind of hell for fantasy football purposes. I mean, you have a backfield where you can make the argument for almost any 3 of those running backs. I think Forsett obviously has the edge over the other guys, but he's also getting up there in age, and he's coming off an injury. And then you look at the wide receiver group. You have Steve Smith coming back from an injury that not many players come back from. You have Brashad Perriman, who still has yet to play an NFL snap. You have Mike Wallace, who has been disintegrated ever since he left Pittsburgh, which leaves you with Kamar Aiken, which is really why I think that he's the only guy that I would really invest in, simply because of the giant question marks around those wide receivers in that offense. I mean, the way that I look at Kamar Aiken is, if we assume that Steve Smith weren't playing this season, and if we assume Brashad Perriman continued down the path of staying unhealthy, I think Kamar Aiken would be more in that Alan Hearns range, if you will, in that Alan Hearns range. I think that he would be in this late 6th round pick, and you can get him in the 10th pretty easily. So I think there's some equity to be gained there, because I'm not confident that a 37-year-old Steve Smith comes back and can perform, and I'm not confident that Brashad Perriman can just step on the field and perform either. And then obviously the tight end situation is just one that you just want to completely avoid with there being a 3-headed monster.
I mean, it's one that, obviously, looking at late rounds and streaming QBs, your area of specialty. Joe Flacco is someone that I've been trying desperately to have some sleeper appeal to for years, because especially Mark Trestman, they loves to pass the ball, but it's looking at the pass catches and thinking, yeah, it sounds nice, but I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, when you get to the 11th or, even the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th rounds, there's really not that much difference in terms of the guys that you're getting in the 10th versus the guys you're getting in the 12th or the 13th. So if you're foregoing a wide receiver or a running back and you're opting to get a quarterback, let's say an Eli Manning, who has a decent amount of, or Phillip Rivers, both of them having potential top 5 upside this year, right? I mean, I don't think that's really arguable. They have great weapons and so on. I mean, you look at that and you look at the difference in rounds. That's where you start to think, why would I be drafting Joe Flacco in the 13th when 3 rounds earlier, 2 rounds earlier in some cases, I can get guys who actually have true top 5 upside. To me, Flacco has he has a decent early season schedule, which makes me think that he might not be a terrible pairing with a guy like Tom Brady. But at the same time, I think he's just more of a streamer, because really when you're drafting your quarterbacks that late, you should be looking for guys that actually have top 5 upside.
We spoke just before we started recording, obviously, the news, and it's stunned the entire footballing world that Ryan Matthews is injured, a mere 26 minutes into training camp probably. Is this another reason why the Philadelphia offense is one that you probably really, after a few years of having Chip Kelly, where it was quite fertile ground, it's another one of those teams similar to Baltimore that you probably want to steer clear of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only guy that I can really make a strong case for if he falls is Jordan Matthews, as someone who would be, somewhat attractive. I think that in more savvy leagues, people overstate what Jordan Matthews being in the slot means, because he's still going to garner a lot of volume, and they're going to run three wide receiver sets. It's not going to be that dramatic of a deal. But the problem is it's going to be a fairly conservative offense. They drafted a running back in Smallwood. And they have Darren Sproles, obviously, to catch passes out of the backfield. So Matthews' ceiling was a little bit capped to begin with, just given from a pass-catching standpoint. I think just overall, I think Zach Ertz is a little bit overrated, overvalued, because folks are taking what he did during the second half of last season in a Chip Kelly offense, which is obviously one that will run many more plays than what this year's offense will run, which is really the key. I just think overall it's an offense that I'm generally avoiding.
I mean, I think Zach Ertz, it would help his value for the team as well as fantasy football if someone told him that the season doesn't start in December, it starts in September. Because it's 2 years in a row he's blown up in December. It's like, this has been lovely, Zach, but we kind of needed you a bit earlier than this.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on to another team, obviously connected to yourself, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, they're losing star players at a rate of knots to various substances. We'll say politely. Assuming Le'Veon Bell does miss games, which he doesn't think he will. Good luck with that one, Lev. DeAngelo Williams obviously did really well last year. He came in, he won leagues. It does seem to me though that as quick as people are to throw dirt on the grave of Frank Gore, they're more inclined to say that DeAngelo Williams is the saviour and can be trusted, even though they're pretty much similar in age. Are you worried that even in just a small sample of games, it's still a 33-year-old running back with a far from clean injury history himself?
Yeah, I think those are definitely valid points. I think that the biggest, even if you want to say that he's a 28-year-old running back in the prime of his career, what you're looking at is if and when Le'Veon Bell comes back. I should say when, because I think there's a strong argument. There's a 95+% chance that he does come back in Week 5. When Le'Veon Bell comes back, DeAngelo Williams is not going to be a usable fantasy asset. When Le'Veon Bell played last season, DeAngelo Williams never ranked higher than 50th in PPR rankings at the running back position. It's just that the Steelers will utilize that single back. They'll see 90+% of the team's snaps, which is why DeAngelo Williams was valuable when Le'Veon Bell went down last year. So to me, the folks that are talking about drafting DeAngelo Williams as early as even the 5th round doesn't make that much sense to me, because at most you're going to get 4 usable weeks out of him. 4, sure, they might be elite running back weeks from him. But realistically, if you want to play the math game and the probability game, it's probably going to be more like 3, just because of the way that will shake out. So if you're getting 3 usable weeks from him, you can get that from many players, plus the fact that those other players will continue to be the early down, the primary back on their teams past Week 4. So like you said, to me, I would be taking a Frank Gore over a DeAngelo Williams all day, just because he has much more upside than DeAngelo Williams will, because he's essentially capped by a 4-week period.
The last question I've got for you, obviously very, very appreciative of your time. Obviously, I know you're busy. It's coming down to, it's nearly Christmas for the football playing and watching community. It's time of year that, there's some websites are starting, maybe launching, maybe looking for new talent. You've in the past have given me some feedback on my writing, for which I do appreciate greatly. I see some of the people who are tweeting out asking, for writers, and some of the comments they're getting are people like demanding money straight away. Do you think that some people just assume that fantasy football writing is easy, therefore they must be paid for it, and aren't prepared to put the work in for it?
Yeah, I think that in any profession, you're going to have people that think that they're better than you at what you do, without really peeling back that curtain and seeing what goes on a day-to-day basis. I think it's a lot easier to critique analysis than write analysis. It's very easy to say, oh, this is wrong, and here's why, and just pick apart what's already existing. But to actually create something from nothing is a very difficult thing to do. So I think anyone that's out there writing fantasy football analysis, it's important to just keep at it and understand that, don't feed into the hate. Love what you're doing and understand that the people who have gotten followings, and the people that are trying to just grind that content out to obtain those followings, they're doing it. They're going through a lot in order to make that work and make that happen, because there's a lot of people out there in an industry like this where they sit on their couch, they're looking at their phone, and they can easily critique what you're doing without really looking at all the work that went into it. And at the end of the day, time spent on a certain article, for instance, and this is just the way the writing world works, unfortunately, is time spent on something doesn't equate to money made and so on and so forth. I mean, I've scrapped tons and tons of articles that I worked hours on that I realized just weren't going anywhere, because it's important to only put your best effort out there. So it's important to remember that it's all, when they say that it's a grind, it's a true grind. But at the end of the day, as long as you stay positive and you don't hate on what's going out there, and you just kind of force your own word, your analysis, and stay as objective as possible, I think people will really appreciate that.
It's one of those things. I mean, I love writing for as little time as I get to do it, because it's not my profession, but I do love doing it. The hardest thing, I hate coming up with titles for articles, because I know it's, in anything else, if you're trying to grab people's attention, a question is usually a good way. But if you ask a question, people will answer it in one word on Twitter.
Yes.
Like, it was
obnoxious.
A couple of years ago, I wrote, can Austin Swearingen-Jenkins be a sleeper this year? Someone just put, and I had 5 people, of which I was made up that 5 people were reading my Twitter, just went, no. I went, well, I don't know if you read that, or you just...
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, I don't have a particularly big Twitter following, so if I've just got 5 people all saying no, it's different for, yourself, or, fancy douche, people like this, who've got thousands. They won't see all of them, but for people like just starting out, it can be a little bit, why did I bother?
Exactly. I mean, like I said, we need those people to understand how great the good people are. So it's always good to get any sort of comments back, even if they're trolly comments. But you're right, article title writing and headline writing is not an easy thing to do.
Well, JJ, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you'd just like to tell anyone where they can find you and read your stuff and listen to your words.
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on Twitter at LateRoundQB, and all of my work over at numberfire.com.
That was Dutton with the brilliant JJ Zachariason from numberfire.com. Before we go, just want to talk to you about our friends at DraftKings.co.uk. We have a great new fantasy football kickoff special where you can win £40,000. You sign off for DraftKings, opt in to receive the email communications, and within 24 hours you'll receive an email with a link to claim the offer. Use your free bonus to enter our £40,000 fantasy football kickoff special. Select your starting 8 from the opening day matches and follow all the action on DraftKings.co.uk. To get to that link, all you need to do is head to @waxing_lyrical on Twitter, and in our profile you will see the link there. Also, we have tweeted that out @waxing_lyrical, and me and Neil will also tweet that out. I'm @Maindy7, and Neil is obviously @Ndutton13. Back to a full show next week when we'll talk AFC East and also one of NFC divisions. But until then, this has been Waxing Lyrical. Get used to it.